Well, welcome to another seminar in our series on financial centres of the world. Today, a focus on Busan, a very exciting place and one which not many people know enough about. We're very pleased today to be sharing with you some news on Busan. By way of thanks, first of all, to our sponsors. We couldn't make these series of webinars happen without them, and we're very grateful for their support in allowing us to range far and wide in terms of our webinar offerings. We'll hear today from Young-Ho Park, the head of Busan International Finance Center Promotion Center of Busan Economic Promotion Agency, and Professor Michael Mainelli, the Executive Chairman of the ZN Group. And there'll be time for questions at the end of the presentation. For those of you who haven't used GoToWebinar before, there's a little box on the right-hand side of your screen in the dashboards with a box saying questions, and you can type your questions into the box there, and at the end I'll moderate those and we'll get through as many of those questions as we can. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Young-Ho Park to talk about Busan and its current development.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Michael. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Young-Ho Park. I work at BIFC Promotion Center. Next. I'll begin with a brief overview of Busan and then explain the role of Busan as the financial hub of Asia. Then I'll spend a bit of time on the future of Busan with some of major development projects. The presentation will conclude with why BIFC should be the next most important topic for you to think about. Okay, there is a UN Memorial Cemetery in Busan, and we invite war veterans from overseas every year. After 70 years since the Korean War, they are amazed to see how Busan has overcome the pain of division and the ruins of war and is now one of the leading nations. How did we overcome? I would say it was due to strong governmental initiative and the commitment of Korean people. South Korea became a rising power plant of East Asia. National GDP increased 430 times since 1960, even after taking account inflation. Among many developing Asian countries, this kind of growth stands out. Not just past, Bloomberg has ranked Korea #1 in innovative ranking for 3 consecutive years, and the city is also placed 5th in ease of doing business ranking of World Bank. As a gateway of Northeast Asia, Busan, along with Ulsan and Gyeongnam province, is located in the southern part of South Korea. And these 3 cities with area of 12,000 square meters and 8 million populations in total produce DLDP of $235 billion US. It is one of major industrial cluster with service and manufacturing industries taking almost 90% of the economy. Behind this mega industrial cluster are manufacturing facilities of Korean multinational corporations such as Samsung and Hyundai. And if we stretch this out a little further north, there are LG and POSCO, also known international companies. Obviously, there has to be a top-notch logistic infrastructure to support them, and that is where Busan comes in. Busan has been one of few leading logistic cities for many decades, acting as a door to international trades, connecting Asia to the rest of the world. Busan Port is world's 6th largest one in terms of container cargo handling volume, taking up over 21 million TEU, that is 75% of national total. For the last few years, in an effort to expand its role of gateway, Busan has been opening the door to MICE industry. Hosting more than 850 conferences every year, Busan is developing its capacity as an international networking city. As a result, we have become the fastest growing convention city, As you can see on the left bottom of the slide, we have achieved the 12th city in the world in terms of the number of international conferences held in a relatively short period. Korea is one of the largest trading partners with China and is currently developing various partnerships in the financial sector. For example, since 2017, the Korea-China Financial Cooperation Forum has been held every year between the two countries, especially for discussions on ways to cooperate with local cities and provinces. Also, Korea has a relatively low exchange rate volatility. As of January this year, South Korea has about 400 billion US dollars in foreign exchange reserves, the ninth largest in the world and similar to that of Hong Kong. South Korea's current corporate tax rate is relatively low among major OECD countries, and additional corporate tax reduction and rent support are provided depending on the amount of investment and the size of employment. In addition, Busan has competitive office rents compared to major cities in the world. The coronavirus pandemic has not yet been completely terminated. I hope you are all doing good recently. However, the Republic of Korea is considered to coping with the epidemic as the most exemplary country in the world. In Korea, the number of confirmed cases per day has steadily decreased, stabilizing the situation. Korea is handling the situation well through the implementation of more than 20,000 tests a day, transparent information sharing, and voluntary effort to minimize unnecessary social contact and wearing face masks. In particular, innovative drive-through method and information sharing on infection routes via real-time text messages were introduced for the first time in Korea. Next slide. Currently, Korea is taking the lead in responding to a decrease by sharing success stories in response to coronavirus with other countries around the world. This strength clearly provides that even after the epidemic crisis, Korea is a good place for business and investment. Okay, next slide. Where there are trades and logistics, there always is a need for finance. To support vigorously growing industries, Busan has been concentrating the necessary resources in developing shipping finance and derivatives. And this has been consistently supported and reinforced by the Korean government. To foster specialized finance, KRX, the only stock exchange in Korea, was established in Busan, and since then many of the major institutions were introduced to Busan. And to go further, Busan is preparing for next finance based on strong IT ecosystem. Next slide. In 2009, the city was designated as a financial hub specialized in maritime finance and derivatives on a 100,000 square meter ground. The city began construction of a complex development project with 3 phases. Lastly, in third phases, we aim to create an ivory tower for fintech, the next generation finance, cultivating startups and accelerators. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, to build up a specialized financial cluster, we saw a need for a concentrated expertise. With the strong support from the Korean government, Busan attracted many of the major financial service providers to BIFC. In addition to KRX, KDB, Korean Development Bank, Korea Export and Import Bank, and 7 other public corporations, 9 private and 5 finance-related institutions. So they are currently in total 30 institutions with total assets 140 billion US dollars and 3,800 employees. KDB, Kasim, and K-Sure, Korea Trade Insurance Corporation. These three institutions invested resources, and Marine Finance Center was founded. In addition, Korea Ocean and Business Corporation was established in Busan to enhance the competitiveness of Korean maritime financing. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. As I mentioned, Busan is seeking its way to build ecosystem for next generation of finance. Last year, President Moon announced the designation of Busan as blockchain regulation-free zone. Busan is the only city with such designation in Korea. The Korean government has introduced a regulatory sandbox system with reference to the UK case and has designated 11 areas of Busan, including BIFC, as special zones in relation to blockchain. The blockchain-based development will give the economy a new source of growth, and that is why we are providing incentive packages to fintech institutions to encourage joining the hub. Okay, next. To become the next financial center in Asia, Busan is focusing on changing the regional paradigm. Smart city project and new economic map of Korea and establishment of BFC, Private-Public Partnership Foundation. Okay. Smart city or intelligent city is all connections. Everything is connected. Human, natural environment, and technology are merged, and smart technologies such as AI, IoT, and blockchain are adapted to provide efficient system with livable and sustainable environment to people. In 2008, the city was designated by the government as the National Smart City Model to create an innovative industrial ecosystem and present a future smart city leading model. The project will provide citizens with a natural waterfront grassland environment, as well as a canal-type commercial and business district with cultural complexes. Next slide. Second change Busan is looking at is to implement new economic map of Korea. Busan, being starting point of the North Pole route and the final destination of the Trans-Eurasian Railway, with a competent triple logistics system involving the railway, harbor, and airport. Going forward, the international position of Busan is expected to advance as inter-Korean relations improve. Busan will play a central role through cooperation with BIFC Public Corporation, such as the establishment of North Korean Development Bank. Next slide. Okay, to wrap up, Busan is built on and will continue improving based on 3 F's that I have explained so far. Support from government, specialized finance, and strong IT ecosystem. And in order to take the city to the next level, for all of this to be sustainable, Busan will utilize all the resources available to materialize 2 of its future projects, Smart City and New Economic Map. To do so, we need a central tower for the financial city of Busan. So we are working to set up the Busan Finance Center, PFC, and Private-Public Partnership Corporation organization that will serve as a think tank for the Busan Financial Hub. Okay, next slide. This brings us to one question. Why BIFC? Of all cities and financial centers you see every day, I hope that I have provided you with something that is worth thinking about as to why should you go and invest in Busan. At the end of the day, the excessive and sustainable return of foreign investment can only be realized when there is stable support with vision. Therefore, I'd like to end this presentation with the city's land-free promotion for foreign institutions. We are currently offering 6th, 3rd floor of our main BIFC building with long-term land provision. It'll be an exclusive area to 3 international financial institutions for 25 years with cost-saving effect of nearly $1 million US. And there are also other incentive packages such as tax exempt with complete support from Busan Metropolitan City and BIFC for successful business launching. So for those who are considering their next entrance to Asia, this could also be a food for thought. Okay, thank you for joining us today and listening to my presentation. It was a great pleasure having you all. I hope you get something that is worthy of your time from this event. Thank you very much.
Mr. Park, thank you very much. That was very cogent and extremely intense, and I appreciated it very much. Mike is moving on to my slides, but one of the things I'd like to point out is I first went to Pudong in the last century, and I say Pudong, not Busan as it was then. And I remember in particular that it was a very beautiful natural setting in some ways, but it was a hard scrabble shipping and fishing town as well. And I don't think people understand who haven't been there how much change has really been made. As you point out, it's difficult to remember that there was a major war being fought at not so very long ago. So the recovery is fantastic. And yet there is also a tradition in Busan of trading, financial trading, going back to the Middle Ages with rice derivatives. So there's quite a bit going on there, and I think it is something our audience really needs to get back to. And of course, I've been back to Busan a few times since, most recently, I think it was a couple of years ago. And there you see, of course, South Korea is now cool. We have Gangnam, we have Crash Landing on You. The Oscar best film was Parasite. So well done. Anyway, Busan crash landed on us back in GFCI 22, and it entered, as most centers do, with tremendously high volatility. It's an early stage as people are getting used to it, and it bounces around quite a bit. Really, since then, it has settled down very much in the rankings and has steadily increased in the ratings, and I'll come on to a couple of the reasons for that in a minute. One of the things that has simultaneously been going on, however, has been an increasing number of competitive centers with Busan, and that does, to some degree, depress the rankings as opposed to the ratings. So the ratings being how well the center is performing, which is consistent, solid improvement, and the rankings, which is the competitive evaluation. Next slide, Mike. So one of the things I find interesting is we were holding a session just a couple of weeks ago on the Small Eight, the 8 smaller nations that perform, places like the Netherlands, Denmark, Ireland, Singapore. Now, South Korea certainly doesn't fall into that category. It's quite a large nation, but it came up repeatedly in that conversation as a large nation that thinks small in a good way. And I think that was a fascinating thing for us. And so one of the strengths I'd like to really emphasize here, and you can see it in Mr. Park's remarks about, for example, the central government's extremely competent response to COVID, is a nation with an increasingly strong governmental system in terms of efficacy, high levels of trust nationally, much higher than you'd expect for a nation which had a civil war within living memory. So there's a tremendous amount of really good things going on there. I would also point to the fact that in our experience of working with Korea, both Seoul and Busan for that matter, one of the things we've noticed is the government's commitment to decentralization. Mr. Park remarked upon that. I would pick on the fact that most people aren't aware that KRX, the Korean Stock Exchange, is not really in Seoul. It's actually located as much or more in Busan. So it's a tremendous thing to take account of, is this commitment to not over-centralizing that the government has adopted. And that is a general and wider theme, but it is a theme that's very important for financial services to make sure that there isn't really a monopoly, that all comers, even foreigners, are treated fairly. And that's the important thing. I'll move on, if I could, Mike, to the next slide. On this slide, what I would like to emphasize is what's the future hold. Well, the first thing is that it's about specialization. And Busan is doing a number of things that you would expect many financial centers to do. So the move into fintech, the emphasis on blockchain, the emphasis on smart, the emphasis on education, the emphasis on getting the regulation right, and also, of course, green finance. And one of the things I must say I really appreciated was how much greener Busan was over the years since I've been back. A beautiful city in many ways. And you can see basically trees and greenery and hills from every section of the city. But Busan, in addition, has the focus on maritime and the wider trade finance. And this, given the scale of its port, sixth largest in the world and increasing, and its shipbuilding history and traditions, as well as its location, frankly, it is ideally placed. I think anybody can see that. But to make something of it, to make something of the changes that are wrought by COVID, that are wrought by some of the trade flow changes and trade wars going on, and also by some of the geopolitical changes. So many of you may have seen an article just the other day that pointed out that Busan is being seen, probably because of its high connectivity with Hong Kong, as an area for potential relocation. But one might ask, so what? Well, the truth is, it's just a friendly place. My dear friend Sam Wan-jin, who's sadly retired, took me around and showed me what it was like to come to Busan as a startup business. And I was genuinely walked around to every single ministry I needed to set up a brand new business. I hasten to add, I didn't take any, I didn't complete the forms, but we did all of that in about 2.5 hours. So almost a personalized valet service that shows you how easy it is to establish a business there. So Busan has many things going for it, but over to you, Mike, and to you, Mr. Park, for comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, both. We have some time for questions, and we've got a few in already. If you have other questions, please do type them into the question box. And I should mention that we are today publishing a document focused on Busan, which is available from our website, and we'll send you a link to that after the event. So in terms of questions, the first question that I want to turn to is a question about competition for Busan. So really asking who are Busan's serious rivals as a financial center in the region, and in particular talking about Seoul as the capital of the Korea, and the comparison between Seoul and Busan, and where the strengths and differences are between Busan and Seoul, as well as other competitors in the region.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Michael. Of course, Seoul is the capital of South Korea and is the center of the mega economic zone with a population of about 20 million. Busan is a port city located in southern part of Korea and is a center of port and manufacturing cities with a population of about, as I said in my presentation, 8 million people. Currently, Seoul is strengthening its financial functions with the goal of becoming a comprehensive financial center. Our Busan is surrounded by the sea and has the world's 6th largest container port, which handles 75% of the country's total container volume, and large manufacturing infrastructure such as automobile and shipbuilding. So based on this, Busan aims to be a financial center specialized in maritime finance and derivative finance, especially the Korea Stock Exchange is moved to Busan.
Thank you very much. The next question is saying that Busan's had a very successful period of growth, and asking what its growth strategy is for the future in response to geopolitical events and others. In particular, I guess, in terms of your goal of becoming a specialized financial center for marine finance and derivatives, can you talk a bit more about the policy you're pursuing for growth?
Okay, sure. Before the specialization of maritime finance and derivative finance, in order to develop fundamentals of financial functions, Busan first attracted many major financial institutions to BIFC, as I said in my presentation, with a strong support from the government. In addition to Korea Exchange, Korea Development Bank, and Korea Export and Import Bank, and 7 other public operations, 9 private and 5 finance-related institutions. So there are currently in total 30 financial institutions with the total assets 140 billion US dollars and 3,800 employees. KDB, KEXIM, and K-SURE are main participants in both market and policy making. A little over a year ago, these 3 institutions invested resources and Marine Finance Center, a central control tower in maritime finance, was founded. In addition, Korea Ocean Business Corporation, kind of public organization, was established in Busan to enhance the competitiveness of Korea's maritime transport industry. And in this case, institutions are interacting with each other and working together to discover new business, which are slowly establishing the Busan Finance Center. It is a good example that major institutions continue to provide one-step service and are recognized as a Korean-style maritime finance model by customers.
Thank you very much. There's a question coming actually for Michael Mainelli. And the question is, what's the possible ranking of Busan in the GFCI in the future, and what do you predict Busan's future development might be compared with other cities in Northeast Asia? Given it's difficult to predict the future, but what are the things that you think will affect the ranking of Busan going forward?
Wow, what an extremely good question. This is a little bit difficult, and Mr. Park, please take this with the grain of speculative salt that comes with it. I think Busan has the potential to perhaps touch the top 10. Ultimately, given the structure of Korea going forward, Seoul would probably dominate, but there are many elements which are quite comparable to Singapore in a lot of ways. As Mr. Park mentioned, 75% of Korean trade going through. So I think the factors that matter really are very much the idea of geopolitical stability and where Busan fits in that system. Trade, which as Mr. Park emphasized, if trade goes down or maritime trade finance decrease in the world significantly, then that will have an effect on everyone, but it would have a slightly larger effect, I would anticipate, on Busan. So if trade volumes keep up, if there's geopolitical stability, and if the government keeps this notion that it's happy to see a much more balanced geographical location in Korea, a city of 8 million people in that sort of geographical location has huge potential.
And there's a follow-up to that as well. There's someone asking just to say a bit more about how decentralization helps strengthen the competitiveness of a center.
Yeah, that's a fascinating subject, and one we probably don't have an entire webinar on. One of the difficulties that we face in a lot of the studies of financial centers is when you look at federalized systems, and I would pick here perhaps on America or Canada or even Germany, where there's no single financial center. That's great. People think, oh, Frankfurt, yes, but Munich also for larger insurance and reinsurance, Hamburg for shipping and insurance. You begin to realize that federal systems compete with each other, and people who are looking at relocation appreciate that type of competition. It means that there's ways that they're not facing a monolithic native system. We end almost all of our presentations on how to make a good financial center with one slide, which talks about treating all comers fairly. And I think that's the importance, despite all the various facts and figures, which are copious in our Global Financial Centers Index, our Global Green Finance Index, our Smart Centers Index, people at the end of a bombardment from me or Mike on statistics go, yeah, but just tell me the one thing I need to do. And the one thing you need to do is treat comers fairly. And it really helps to show that there's a decentralized and open environment.
Thank you very much. Going back to a question to Mr. Park, you talked about the Busan Financial Center, being launched next month. And could you say a bit more about the role of the Busan Financial Center and what your hopes are for that?
Okay, next month, the Busan Finance Center will be launched, an organization that will serve as a central tower for the Busan financial system. It's like a central system for our nerve system, kind of central nerve system. The BFC will be a control tower that will draw on Busan's vision of North Asia's the financial hub and develop the financial industry in a systematic manner. In addition, BFC will play a role in think tank responding to future changes in financial markets and develop Busan-style financial specialization models such as maritime, logistics, and derivative financing. It will also actively attract domestic and foreign financial institutions, train financial professionals through the financial-related education, and establishment of industry academic networks, and actively attract financial seminars and forums. One of the most important features of PFC is that local government, financial institutions, and local representative financial institutions work together to gather opinions and operate in creating financial hub.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question. Just about the legal system used in Busan. Obviously, some financial centers have different ways, but the Korean legal system, I think, is the one that governs financial transactions in Busan. Could you say a little bit about the type of legal system that you use?
So as I mentioned earlier, in 2009, Korean government designated Busan as a financial hub specialized in maritime derivative finance, according to the specialized capital law of Korea. We have the special financial hub law to liberalize, open up our market and liberalize the international financial transactions. And then also, according to that law, the local government, Busan Municipal City, can regulate, exempt some taxes and provide some incentives to the financial institutions located in BIFC.
Thank you very much. I want to turn on to blockchain and fintech and the excitement of new technology. And you spoke about the blockchain regulation-free zone. And what changes do you think blockchain technology are going to bring in the financial sector? And what's your policy to attract more fintech business and grow fintech companies?
Okay, as I said before, the Busan was designated as a regulatory-free zone, the only free zone in Korea. Last year, President Moon by himself announced the Busan a blockchain regulatory-free zone. So it means that the Korean government adapt the regulatory sandbox system for the first time in Korea. So, and also the 11 areas were designated as a regulatory free zone to test and develop blockchain-based software and systems. And so we strongly believe that a lot of fintech startups and accelerators get together in the BIFC, and we also established kind of fintech hub center called U-Space. So last year, about 30 fintech startups already gathered and clustered in that U-Space.
Okay. A question around the ranking in the GFCI. Professor Mainelli has already referred to his speculative thoughts about where Busan might go. But the question is really, what do you think needs to be done to make Busan more attractive, more competitive as an international financial center? What's your take on this question?
Okay, very good question. So it's true that Busan has been somewhat stagnant in attracting financial institutions. Since the creation of infrastructure in financial center, I think the key is to create a city where foreign investors or financial experts want to stay. A cluster must be created that can solve all financial problems in one place. So I think we should be able to provide one-stop service to our customers. Foreign investors should be able to raise funds and list the stocks easily and be able to communicate in the world's common languages such as English. We also need a variety of a direct flight to make the city accessible. So the discussions on direct airport, the 24-hour international airport, are being held at the government level, and excellent residential conditions such as BIFC, Marine City, and Centrum City in Busan are also well established. Although it's not easy for all latecomers to create a good environment at once, we'll continue to promote the benefits such as low corporate tax rates, low rental cost, various business opportunities, and active support from the Korean government.
Thank you very much. A question now about the work that's been done to create and test a digital yuan, RMB, with the goal of increasing sort of circulation on trade, lessening the dollar as part of the East Asian trade currency. Do you have any thoughts about the use of the yuan as a major trading currency and how the may affect Busan and trade generally?
I'm afraid I have to say that in Korea we have a rather strict foreign exchange regulations. So still our central government reluctant to open our foreign exchange market. So also we have a free exchange system. So in Busan, because we specialize financial hub of Korea, so we asked our government to liberalize in the foreign exchange sector, especially for the BIFC, or the financial regulatory free zone.
Okay. And the final question is just going back to the blockchain regulatory free zone. On the tax regulations, obviously the tax regulations are still in place, but with some privileges in Busan. What about other regulations? So do the regulations of the central bank and the stock exchange apply to the blockchain free regulatory zone, or how are they going to interact with the blockchain free regulatory zone?
As I said before, basically the system is the same as the case of UK, the regulatory sandbox system. So the startups who want to develop the new software or hardware software or system using the blockchain, they apply their proposals to the local government and or the BIFC, and we get together. We gather all these kinds of applicants to provide the Korean regulatory authorities like a financial service commission, and the relatively short time they finally decide to let them go and give them a green light or something like that. So as I would say this is basically kind of a regulatory sandbox system like UK.
Thank you very much indeed. We are running out of time, I'm afraid, so I'm going to bring the question and answer session to an end. In the Focus on Busan document we're publishing today in partnership with BIFC, there are contact details. So if you wanted to email to follow up on any of the questions that you've asked, or to get more information about what's going on in Busan and how they might be able to help you, please refer to that document and use the contact details which you'll find in there. So I'm going to bring this to an end, but thank you very much to Mr. Park and Professor Michael Mainelli. There are opportunities to get involved with our work on financial centres, and the 3 indices that we are running, the Global Financial Centres Index, the Global Green Finance Index, and the Smart Centres Index, are ones we'd love you to get involved with. If you have any questions or want to get involved, please do get in touch with us. And finally, just a reminder that the Global Financial Centres Index 28 will be published in September of this year. The survey is live, and please do take the opportunity to fill in the GFCI questionnaire, and of course to rate Busan along with other financial centres that you know. I'm just going to finish by reading out not a question so much as a comment that's been received in the questions. Just to say, I'm just trying to need to find it now. Someone said, please pass on our thanks to Mr. Park. 2 of us here listened avidly to this very interesting talk and discussion. Many thanks again to Mr. Park and to all involved in organising the event. So thank you very much indeed to Mr. Park, to Professor Mainelli, and to all of you for participating and giving us your questions. We hope to see you again at part of our webinar series. We have a session on Tokyo next week. For those of you who are interested in Asia, you might want to join us for that. But thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.